Well, apologies for the slight delay in starting this program. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this, what we have called the Professional Development Seminar on Transition from High School to Higher Education, Role of School Leadership. It's really a pleasure to see all of you, particularly from the schools of India, various schools including schools from different parts of the country, for taking your precious time, principals, counselors, teachers, as well as others who are participating in the broader framework of school education and higher education. I would also like to take this moment to thank my colleagues, Maushmi, Dev Lahiri, Indrani, as well as others who have put together this program for the last month and a half or so, because as a university we've always felt that the dialogue between the higher education institutions and school education is completely absent in India. This is not the first time we are doing this. We have done at least 5 conferences and seminars in the past, specifically focusing on the school education in the context of transitions from school to higher education, although we have been engaging with the principals and counselors of schools across the country in various capacities, including another institution that we have called the Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences. But this is a very a unique moment for us to really reflect about the future of higher education and to what extent the foundations of that is going to be laid in the schools of India as well as in other parts of the world. To briefly introduce our university, O.P. Jindal Global University was founded through a philanthropic initiative of our founding chancellor, Mr. Jindal. I had the privilege to meet him in the year 2006 and 7 and spent a year persuading him to do 3 things. 1, to contribute substantial resources. 2, to do it in a not-for-profit manner. And 3rd, to let me have the academic freedom and autonomy and independence to build a world-class university in India. My own educational experiences, like my colleagues, have been both in India and other parts of the world. I did my undergraduation from Loyola College Madras, which shaped my own foundations of higher education in India. Also did my law degree from the University of Delhi, after which I was a Rhodes Scholar at the University of Oxford, where I did my master's. And then I did another master's degree at Harvard in the US, worked in New York and Tokyo and Hong Kong for many years, and those experiences shaped my thinking about the need for creating a university in India which fulfills the desires and aspirations of young Indians. That culminated in the process of me writing a paper during my years in Hong Kong where I was teaching, and then I got to meet this person, Mr. Jindal, who agreed to do all of that. By late 2007, he accepted my request and I moved to India from Hong Kong in early 2008. From early 2008 onwards, we began the process of institution building from scratch. Land acquisition, formulation of curriculum, course structure, program development, faculty recruitment plan, student admissions process, of course hiring of architects, construction engineers, contractors, and a whole range of regulatory processes, including moving the government of Haryana to pass the legislation, securing the permission from the Bar Council of India, as well as other regulatory bodies, and building an entire campus in a span of less than 6 months with over 5,000 workers of India's largest construction company, Larsen & Toubro, working 24/7 from February 2009 to September 2009. As promised to Mr. Jindal, we completed the construction of campus, but also recruitment of faculty and admission of students. And on 30th September 2009, we began the first academic session of the first school of the university, the Jindal Global Law School, with only 100 students and 10 faculty members. It was a very modest beginning, but we did open the doors of our university to the world at large. We never looked back. In 2010, we started the Jindal Global Business School. In 2011, the Jindal School of International Affairs. In 2012, the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. In 2013, the Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities. And just last year, in 2016, we started the 6th school of the university, the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. During these 7 years of our evolution and growth, we still believe that we are in the first decade of planning and institution building. With all the challenges that come with Indian higher education, both in terms of regulation, policy, and governance, one of the things that we've always done is to be able to engage with the student community at large. From the very beginning, in 2008 onwards, we have been traveling across the country, I have personally given over 4,000 talks across the country. I have spoken in almost all states of India and primarily addressing school students as well as colleges, but largely in schools, engaging with students at the high school level. And one of the things that always left me with that impression is the kind of a fair amount of lack of information, but most importantly, even misinformation that does spread around the need for and the purpose of education itself, let alone career planning as well as higher education opportunities and all of that. So we decided long ago that we will continue to engage with this community, not so much to promote our programs, which also is an outcome of some of those efforts and initiatives, but primarily to engage with the school communities, the school principals, the school teachers, the school counselors, of course the students, and indeed the parents, to talk about higher education, to talk about transition from school education to higher education, to develop a sense of preparedness and informed knowledge and understanding of higher education opportunities. In our own journey and efforts, there have been 5 things that are shaped our vision and continue to shape our mission. For us, these 5 things are part of our core and indeed our DNA. These include, first, we are a global university. For us to be a global university means to have a global curriculum, a global course structure, a global program, a global faculty, a global research agenda, all of which promoting global interaction. To advance this agenda, we had recruited faculty members from around the world. Over 22% of our full-time faculty members are non-Indian nationals recruited from 20 different countries in the world. The faculty diversity that our university has internationally and domestically matches and even surpasses to several older institutions, including some of the leading universities in Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong, as well as other parts of the Western world. It also means for us to be able to build substantive international collaborations with institutions around the world. In the last 7 years, we have built over 165 partnerships spread across 44 different countries in the world, in which we have established 10 different forms of collaborations. These include faculty exchange programs, student exchange programs, joint teaching, joint research, joint conferences, joint publications, dual degree programs, summer schools and winter schools, study abroad programs, and joint executive education programs. For us to be able to build a global university means to be able to advance a research agenda, and that is the second aspect of our vision. We strongly believe that universities are knowledge-creating institutions, and they need to be defined by their ability to contribute to the big ideas of our time. While we focus on humanities and social sciences and professional schools such as law and business, and we don't do engineering, we don't do hard sciences, we don't do medicine, but there is so much of research that ought to be developed in these fields, and we ought to be developing capacities within our country. Time and again it has been lamented by policymakers in India, higher education leaders, as well as no less than the Prime Minister and the President, that not a single Indian university is one of the top 200 in the world in any of the rankings that we have. And this problem has become much more serious in recent times, when the last 2 decades has seen a significant impetus towards developing world-class universities in Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong, Taipei, Japan, as well as mainland China. While India continues to struggle with some of the most serious, significant issues relating to regulation, policy, and governance of our higher education institutions. The leading universities in India, the 45 of them, the central universities, suffer from a significant crisis in governance, which has led to a situation where over 45% of our faculty positions are lying vacant, unfilled for over a decade. My own alma mater, Delhi University, suffers from that. The leading university institutions such as the IITs and IIMs have over 35% faculty positions lying vacant, unfilled. If you look at the public universities across the state governments in India, there are over 50% of faculty positions lying vacant, unfilled. And of course, not to talk of the mediocre, dubious, profit-making commercial private universities, which have their own problems, both in terms of faculty as well as other issues. So in some ways, we have in many ways undermined and to large extent destroyed our higher education system, in which mediocrity is deeply embedded and institutionalized in our public education sector as well as private higher education institutions. It is in this context that the challenge of conversations and transitions between school education and higher education is so critical and so important, as we know that the foundations of higher education in many ways is actually taking place while our children are at school. And in that sense, we need to focus on the larger vision of this transition. The big challenges of our high school education we continue to struggle with it, be it in terms of curriculum and course, be it in terms of interdisciplinarity, be it in terms of understanding the deeper values that are critical for the future of our young people. While India continues to grow at a significant economic rate, we also are conscious of the fact that over 850 million people in India are less than 35 years of age. The young people of India are going to shape the future of India and the world. We owe it to them and also to us that we build a strong foundation for school education, which in turn shapes the future of higher education. So I would like to stop here by saying that we are very excited about this today's seminar, but then this seminar is part of a larger conversation that we want to continue to have with the school community. We established the International Institute for Higher Education Research and Capacity Building specifically with the objective of contributing to a dialogue, a discussion, a discourse, and indeed to develop deeper knowledge and perspectives through research and capacity building. I am grateful to my colleagues for conceiving the seminar. I'm thankful to all of you for being here on a Saturday morning. I can't help but reflect about the fact that there are so many things you could have all been doing on a Saturday morning, but I appreciate the fact that you've taken some time out to be here and to sort of debate and discuss about the future of the transition from school to higher education. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rajkumar. My name is Dr. Moushami Mukherjee. I'm one of the assistant directors of the International Institute for Higher Education, Research and Capacity Building at OP Jindal Global University. I'm a very new recruit myself, coming back to India after 11 years of my own studies abroad in the US and Australia. And Vice Chancellor right now mentioned the importance of research, which we are really trying to promote through the Institute. And many of you, those who have studied abroad or have done research abroad, you know that school leadership itself is a big research area of research. There has been several studies done to show that apart from in-classroom instructional factors, apart from the teachers, school leaders and school leadership is one of the major variable factors in terms of in-school factors, not just to improve student learning, but also to create inclusive schooling system, and inclusive in terms of inclusion of children with all kinds of diverse learning needs and social needs and emotional needs. So, and we have several experts here in our panel today who are going to talk about all these things. I'm not going to take too much of time here to myself say too much. So I will pass on to our colleague, Mr. Devapriya Lahiri, who is the director of our Student Welfares Department at Open Jindal Global University, and he's going to give his introductory remarks and call the first panelists to begin the session proceedings today. Thank you.
Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Rajkumar, eminent panelists and distinguished guests, this whole problem, first of all, a very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of JGU for being here on a Saturday morning, as the Vice Chancellor pointed out. And I hope more and more will come in as the day progresses. Particularly because I think this is a very, very important subject that we are going to deal with today. Education, and generally school education, has been long neglected, and I don't want to go down that road. Tomes are being written, will be written on that subject. The one specific area that we are touching on today is this gap between school and university. the hiatus there. And that's the issue that we are going to touch on today. And I just want to spend 5 minutes reflecting on this, because I've had this unique opportunity to have my foot in both camps as a school teacher of 35 years, and now in university looking after young adults and kind of hand-holding them. I'd just like to bring to the table some things which I hope will provide food for thought. See, the problem that appears to me in our country is that schools and universities live on two different planets, and there is a huge gap there. Now, a young person, what does a university expect of let's look at the various fronts. Let's look at the academic front first. What does a good university, expect a young person who's joined and enrolled to be able to do? I'm sure I'm not wrong, and Dr. Rajkumar will bear me out, that as a university, you're expected to be able to think for yourself, to problem solve, to ask questions, to research and reference, to be an independent learner. What do we do in schools? We prepare them for certification for the CBSE or the ICSE. We put them in little boxes right from class 9. They are either commerce or humanities or science, and never the three shall meet. We give them a tunnel vision. We expect them not to ask questions and to do exactly what the syllabus dictates and to regurgitate. What kind of preparation is that for university? What kind of preparation is that for university? Question asking is frowned upon. Don't waste my time. I've got 40 other kids to look after if I'm going to answer your question. Right? And then we hard boil them in the tuition market. We put them like we put them through a hard boiling process in the tuition market. Today, there are so many school teachers here, and I doubt if anyone will disagree, we have been completely overtaken by the tuition market. If a kid today in class 11 and 12 has the choice between school and tuition, he or she will opt for tuition and not come to school. Because we've forgotten the word education. School, I think it's a misnomer, school education. It's certification. It's all about board examinations. And I dare say the two are very different. Preparing for board exams and being educated are sometimes very, very different. So that's on the academic front. Then you have this socio-cultural problem, because most schools, by far and large, are pretty homogeneous in their socio-cultural background, right? The kids come from a particular state of society and so on and so forth. A university is a melting pot. You have everybody. You have people from the south, the north, the west, the east, and from different economic strata. It's a huge melting pot. So this young adult, who's already hugely confused by the paradigm shift on the academic front, is also thrust into a socio-cultural milieu which is hugely different from what he or she has been used to. Then there is the issue of, so to cope with that is a problem. Then thirdly, there is the issue of, in many cases, of being exposed to a mixed environment in terms of sexes. Many of our kids come from single-sex schools, and suddenly they are in university and they find that they have to relate to the opposite sex. Now, that's a huge challenge for some. For some, it's okay, but for many, it's a huge challenge. And the reaction is either to go overboard and say, wow, I've arrived in Baywatch country, or to go into a shell as a shock from the whole experience. The shyer ones go into a shell. So there is that problem. Then there's a problem of acute loneliness on account of an unstructured environment. You know, especially for boarding school kids, whose lives are dictated by the bell in school. And all day schools and boarding schools are the same. Bell ring, you're like a robot. You get up and you go and there's attendance and you are accounted for it. When you come to university, no one gives a damn whether you're dead, alive, attending class or not. And it breeds an acute sense of loneliness, a huge sense of loneliness. I felt that as a student. Nobody cares here. I'm not going to class, nobody cares. What the hell is going on? I'm not eating, 3 days I've been lying ill and nobody's bothered. A huge sense of loneliness. So these are massive issues that kids have to cope with. And then healthcare. In most schools, healthcare is top concern because schools are petrified. What will the media do if a kid falls ill and you have a health center and colleges by far and large, and I'm glad to say Jindal is a huge exception because they have a fabulously equipped health center. But in most colleges, they couldn't. Delhi University, I had to go to a place called WUS, World University. And in St. Stephen's, which was supposedly the elite college, we had a gentleman by the name of Kapoor Singh, so may we remember him, whose knowledge of medicine ended with the Crimean War. So there is a huge difference. Now, the young person comes to university, right, and is dealing with all these issues. Now, in university, who is he or she entrusted to? There are two ends of the spectrum. At one end, you have the faculty, who, first of all, don't really have the time to handhold kids. They are busy with their research, they are busy with their teaching, their seminars, their conferences, their international jaunts, and I dare say, at the risk of offending some of my very, very valuable colleagues here, that there is a bit of snobbery also involved in this. At college. This is not my. I'm not here to do all this, to nappy change, like someone told me. I'm not here to change nappies for these kids, So that's the faculty. At the other hand, who's to look after them? We have wardens. By my understanding of the English language, wardens belong either to a jail or to a game sanctuary. But in university, they are expected to look after students. Now, to me, I have a problem with that nomenclature because to me, it sums up a mindset that the university has about student issues, that you give them to wardens. Now, and wardens are expected to deal with all these issues. It's like asking a Tonga horse to run in the Kentucky Derby. They don't have the skills, they don't have the background. So there is a huge problem there. So at the human level, Dr. Raj pointed out at the structural level, and at the human level, there are huge problems with our kids transitioning from school to university. And these are the issues which I hope and pray that today's panelists, we have a power-packed panel. I'd like to compliment and congratulate the Vice Chancellor for having backed this effort to organize this seminar. I hope this will be the beginning, it's just the beginning of many conversations across this country on a subject that needs a lot of attention. Because these are the people we are releasing into this country to lead our country forward. What kind of preparation are we doing? It's a sacred responsibility. It cannot be taken lightly. It cannot be taken lightly. Why are we in the mess that we are in? If we had prepared these kids better right from school into university to be good citizens, caring citizens, looked after their emotional, psychological, physical, academic, intellectual needs, we would probably have a much better country. We are paying a price. Every day we are paying a price. So it's time somebody woke up and said, hey, what's going on? And I hope that the eminent panelists that we have here today will issue that clarion call and wake us up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dev. We are at the end of our introductory session today. I would really like to welcome now, thank you, Professor Rajkumar, our Vice Chancellor. Thank you for joining us this morning. I would now like to welcome our first panelists, Dr. Gideon Arulmani from Promise Foundation, Bangalore, Dr. Shonali Nag from University of Oxford, Dr. Annie Koshi, Principal St. Mary's School, and Dr. Shalini Advani, Director, Pathway School, Noida.
I'm privileged to be the moderator for this very, very eminent panel. I guess I won't have much moderation to do because I mean, these are experts, huge, as I will, be reading out their little biopics to you, you will realize what a power-packed panel we have. So I guess I won't have very much to do. Apart from introducing them, Dr. Gideon Arulmani is a clinical psychologist. He's the founder and managing trustee of the Promise Foundation, headquartered in Bangalore. He has been interested in the interface between culture and counseling with specific reference to the psychology of work and careers. He's well known for his book on the theory and practice of career counseling, which was published by McGraw-Hill in 2004. He's an international consultant for the World Bank, UNICEF, and the Asian Development Bank, for whom he has executed assignments on guidance and counseling in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. He's a board member of the International Association for Educational and Vocational Guidance and an honorary research fellow, University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom. He's an international fellow of the National Institute of Careers, Education and Counselling, UK, visiting senior lecturer at the University of Canterbury, Christchurch, UK, and visiting professor at the Martin Luther University, India. He's president of the Indian Association for Career and Livelihood Planning. He's a member of the Government of India Planning Commission's Committee for Adolescent Development and Youth Affairs. Dr. Shonali Nag is a clinical psychologist who's trained in NIMHANS in Bangalore. She's a Newton Fellow of the Royal Society and British Academy for her work on cognitive science, Associate Professor of Education and Developing Child at the University of Oxford, and the first Education Fellow at Brasenose College in Oxford. She is the Chief Editor of the Indian Journal of Career and Livelihood Planning, and her focus is on special education needs of school to work transition. She is a consultant to a large number of international agencies. Dr. Annie Koshi is no stranger to many of us here. She's principal of St. Mary's School, did her schooling from All Saints in Nainital, and her post-graduation from Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi. She completed her B.Ed at CIA Delhi and has done her MA in Educational Management from Oxford Brookes in the United Kingdom. She was specially trained in testing and evaluation as part of the CBSC ELT project at the College of St. Mark's and St. John's, Plymouth, and the UK. She completed her PhD from the Indian Institute of Technology in New Delhi. The topic of her thesis was the discourse of education, re-examining the concept of inclusion via a study of the narratives of school children in the Indian state. And what really brought me into contact with her was her advocacy of the cause of the disabled, and she has worked hard to create an inclusive school where physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially challenged children study together in the mainstream, a school where difference is accepted and celebrated. She's a member of the State Advisory Council constituted by the NCT of Delhi to advise the government on the implementation of the provisions of the right of children to free and compulsory education. She is a chairperson of Pratham Delhi Education Initiative and a member of the Departmental Advisory Board, Department of Education, of Groups with Special Needs, NCRT. She has received several awards, and I won't bother with reading those out because it will take up the rest of the day. And we are extremely privileged to have her here. Dr. Shalini Advani has been principal of the British School, New Delhi, Director Education of Learn Today. Her wide experience in setting up and heading schools includes creating effective learning environments, school management systems, staffing and curriculum development with IB and GCSE curriculum as well as CBSE schools. She has conducted numerous teacher trainings on how children learn, collaborative teaching, and whole school development. Her ideal school is one where every child, teacher, support staff member is encouraged to develop and grow. She is a member of the NCERT Steering Commission for the Revised English Curriculum, on the editorial group for its English textbooks, and a member of the NCERT Special Committee to develop reading schools in government schools in the district of Mathura. Her publications include Growing Up in the Nuclear Shadow, published by Orion Longman, a reader for young people on nuclearization and peace, which is so very important, Educating the National Imagination, OUP, a study of nationalism, which I dare say is a very controversial term these days, in English language textbooks, and as special editor of an issue of Contemporary Education Dialogue in the National Curriculum Frame. She cares passionately about creating a dynamic educational environment for all children and believes that encouragement and a sense of humor, and that is so important, are the most important tools for, I think, not only for educators, for everybody, and particularly our politicians. So it's a privilege to have them all here with us, and let's just kick off the first discussion. If I may just repeat this, it says, understanding and responding to the challenges of adolescence. Dr. Arulmani, the term adolescence is a very, in a heterogeneous, such a heterogeneous country like India. I mean, there are all kinds of adolescents. Someone who's growing up as an adolescent in Gurgaon is possibly a little different from someone growing up as an adolescent in Sonipat, or perhaps in Mathura. And then adolescence has its own cultural connotations as well. Adolescents are different in Chennai and brought up to, the whole experience of adolescence. So I would like you to throw some light on that and begin your presentation on that note. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you. Let me begin by first of all thanking the organizers of this conference for having me here this morning. I would like to begin by making the statement that many of the ideas that I'm going to be talking about evolved over a period of 20 years nearly, and began in my discussions with Dev and Indrani nearly 2 decades ago, from the point of view of the school. And I've listened to the Vice Chancellor's comments and also to Dev's comments. It's absolutely true when you say that there is a huge disconnect between the school sector and the higher education sector. There have been attempts, few and far between, to make the links. But almost 99 times out of 100, this attempt to make the link has been from the higher education sector toward the school sector. Right? Now this doesn't make logical sense because it's from the top to the bottom. I work largely with school children. I mean, I teach in the universities of a number of countries and so on, but I'm basically a person who's come here from the school side. And the question that bounces around in my head so often is, what do the schools have to say? It's very well for us to be able to stand on a podium like this and look down there at them and say, you change. Yeah? How about changing the perspective to look the other way and say, you change up here? Because this first topic, adolescence, is not only the result of physical maturation, it is largely related to mental maturation. And when I walk through the corridors of universities, I find, 45-year-olds who are still in the universities, who are still adolescent in their thinking, in their engagement with the university system. 45 years old, 5 attempts at examinations, incapable of stepping out into the real world. So adolescence is a word, that was the question they've had right just now. Adolescence is not merely related to growing up in a physical sense. Adolescence is largely related to growing up in an intellectual sense. So you could have, in Rwanda, where I worked on a project for UNICEF, you could have a 7-year-old who's 35 in her head because she was part of the genocide. You could have an adolescent who is 13 years old in Vietnam, but who picked up one of those orange things, imagining it was a food packet, because that's what they did, that's what the Americans did, isn't it? Agent Orange was mustard gas packed in orange, but the food that UNICEF dropped was also orange in its packaging. This is what growing up is about very often in this country, where the information presented to our young people is not altogether sound. And then we want them to grow up, and then we still want them to fit in. And then we have the employers saying to us that 99% of the young people coming out of the university system are unfit to be employed. But there are very fundamental issues, which I thought I would very quickly take you through. I have 2 sessions, for better or for worse, with you. So my presentation would be in 2 parts. If what I don't finish now, I will pick up in the afternoon session. So now when we speak about adolescence, this is what we often say, isn't it? The youth of today, alas, the young people of today think of nothing but themselves. They have no reverence for parents or old age. They're impatient of all restraint. They talk as if they alone know everything. Just read through the rest of it. This is commonly what we say about adolescence. When do you think this statement was made? It's a quotation. When do you think the statement was made? Yesterday, 20 years ago, when Dave was fighting with his adolescents in Lawrence School? When do you think it was said?
It must be years ago.
It was many, many years ago. IIHEd, 8th century BC. Here's another one. What is happening to our young people? They disrespect their elders, they disobey their parents, they ignore the law, they riot in the streets inflamed with wild notions. We read about this with the JNU crisis a few months ago. Their morals are decaying. We often say this to the adolescent, isn't it? The morals don't fit with us. We moralize, and that's such a characteristic that's developing in our country now. Moralizing education, putting these things up on a platform. What is to become of them? This was not said in the Times of India last year. It was said by Plato himself. So this tug between the adolescent and the adult characterizes the human situation. The child and the adult get along because one depends upon the other. The adolescent and the adult fight like this because one is in a position to challenge the other. The adult can look at the adolescent and say, "Now you are the future, I'm willing to step aside." We could say that and prepare them for the stepping aside. Or we could say, "I'm not going to step aside. You become like me." And that becomes a very deeply cultural issue. And that has become a burning issue for this country. The replication of adulthood, rather than the creation of newness and a future orientation. Now, when we look at adolescent development, just to quickly go back to the textbooks, there are a number of dimensions to it, isn't it? Those of you who remember your psychology would say that adolescence has a physical dimension, a mental, a social, and moral dimension, many other dimensions. It's a dimensional matter. It's not just a physiological matter. It's not just a matter of sexual maturation and the development of secondary sexual characteristics. At the heart of the whole thing is the mental, the cognitive changes that we see in the human individual during this period of life. And when I say period of life, I don't mean 13 to 21. It could be 45 to 55 when this change happens. What is it that characterizes this mental development? Thinking processes for the first time become rational rather than emotional. The child has an emotional bond with the caretaker. I love my daddy, I love my mom. Mommy loves the little one. Now when your mind begins, when your brain matures, you are in a position now to develop a relationship based upon argument, based upon evidence, based upon rationality. Now for the first time perhaps in this person's life, he or she can distinguish between what is fact and fiction. Yeah? Half the time we are feeding them fiction. We call it evidence. We call it research. Research is fundamental, so important. But how valid is that research? How scientifically rigorous has that research been, has been conducted? So the difference between fact and fiction. Your class student, your university student now, for example, is able to distinguish between fact and fiction. Is capable of processing more information. Think of your own adolescence, age-wise, and your mom and dad. You were quicker. And as it goes along, the adolescents of today are the ones who are much better with the thing, on the, what do you call this, the phone thing. Yeah? They're much quicker with it. Not because they are digitally more capable, but simply because they are at a point in their lives when all their capabilities are peaking. You and I were quicker than our parents with whatever the tool it was that came into play. It could have been a pickaxe in the Stone Age period, long ago. It's the peaking of capabilities. We're able to handle more information. Orientation to time becomes more real. Yeah. That there is a future, that there is a possibility for me in the future. This becomes real for the young person for the first time. The adolescent is now aware, the person who's now an adolescent is aware that present actions can cause changes in the future. They're aware of it. What I do today, the course that I'm going to take today, is going to have an impact on my future. That's when the class 10 and 11, the question, you do career guidance and livelihood planning in class 7. It's out of place because their orientation to the future is still day after tomorrow. I have to give in my homework day after tomorrow. But the adolescent is able to say, if I don't take science, my future is doomed. Yeah, it's not true. If you take science, perhaps your future is doomed if you're not fit for science. Yes, and I'm glad the university stands for this principle. Not very many universities stand for the value of the humanities. Yeah. But then the ability to link my present with the future begins during these years. And what is it that the young person is being given with which to perceive the future? IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, Engineering, Medicine, that is the future. That's what they're being told. That's not fact. The person is the fact. The fact that I am perhaps better at accounting and perhaps that I will be better at management or psychology, that might be the true evidence. Yes, to go on the effect of this. What is the effect of this kind of maturation? And they're unwilling now to accept what they cannot understand. They're potentially unwilling. They are potentially unwilling. And I will come back to this. Why am I not so confident of this sentence? I'll come back to it just. They're potentially capable of rebelling against what they don't understand. They're unable to tolerate inconsistencies and perceive them as hypocrisy. Rioting on the streets. Why do they riot on the streets? You and I did it in some way or the other when we were in that age. Why do we do it? Because when we look at the bigger system, and that's what I'm coming to, at the end of the day, I need to integrate with the bigger system, whether it's the university system or college system or the country or the culture. When I look at it, and I'm not allowed to question it, and thereby find my place in the larger system, I will say the system sucks, the system stinks, and whatever the words are that they use much stronger words than that. They tend to be cynical and critical as a result. They become outspoken and dismissive. You see, there is this tug between the system, between the adult and the young person. Yeah? The adult is presently in a more powerful position. So the adult can dismiss. That the adult can say to them that JNU is a leftist university. There are 35,000 condoms found on the campus of JNU. That's what the newspaper said. We dismiss them because we hold the power. Instead, if we believe that they are the future, we should open and engage. Yes, or else we're heading for trouble, big trouble. They can, very often they come to conclusions, adolescents, without verifying the validity of their conclusions. So this is very often what happens. What does the adolescent respond to? What will the adolescent respond to? Facts and figures, true facts and figures, debates and discussions. And we do this in our universities. I'm speaking to you from the school to the university, not from the other way around. Yeah? When we look at it from here, they do, you university people do have debates and discussions, but they're foreclosed. At the end of the day, the adolescent must toe the line. Or else, she's put over there and said, now she needs help, she needs a psychologist, she needs Sonali Nag or Gideon or clinical psychologist to counsel them because they're not fitting in. Yeah? A debate, if it's true debate, the adult must be able to say, I'm wrong. I'm thinking in another century. How many adults are able to say that? I'm asking you this as a school to the university. I mean, I get these horrendous letters from the IIT. I get these horrendous students, yeah, who say to me, I could have read them out to you, but the general feeling in these institutes of excellence is that we've tried to get into these institutes since the class 8. They are in these tutorial systems in Rajasthan, in Kota, and 50. Yeah. We have parents calling us up. We have parents calling us in our office and asking for aptitude testing, by which they mean career guidance. And when we ask them the age of the child, they say the age of the child is 5. They want to put them into these boxes, as they were saying, from age 5 so that they can stream them into the IIT. Great, okay. One of my own students is a counselor at one of the IITs, and she wanted to do a research project, yes. So I said, just ask one question to your first batch. Do you like engineering? Simple, one question research. Yeah? 82% of the first batch in this particular IIT, 82% said that they hated engineering. Yes? And they were put through these hoops from class 5, yes, without the possibility of debate and discussion. If you sit a class 10 student down and engage with them on career development, for example, most of them will say IIT, engineering, medicine, and so on. Yeah? But as the days go on, a few days later, if the discussion continues and you allow a sense of security to develop with the school child, then the truth will start coming out. Actually, I love painting. But I've been told that you can't make it as a painter. Of course you can make it as a painter, perhaps not Hussein, but there is commercial art, there's graphic art, there's web designing, there's a whole lot of highly paid stuff that you can learn. Yeah? Debates and discussions. Issues that will push them to think. In the university, are we still putting them into boxes? Yeah? This letter that I received, gold medalist in 10th, first rank in CBSE, first rank in 12th, first rank in the exams that brought him into the IIT, and he says to me that I'm scared now to speak in class because the professor will be threatened. The professor will be threatened. I'm really asking you this. Yeah? And there's another boy who wrote to me, and he said that there's a thing that's going around in our IIT, which is my teacher got his degree at 35, but they buried him at 60.
Sorry?
They buried him when he was 60. He stopped growing. My teacher died at 35. That's what he said. Died at 35, but they buried him when he was 60. I mean, I'm coming back to this again and again. It's one thing to talk about the schools. The bigger crisis is in the institutes of higher education. It's a huge crisis. If you can't do it, then you become a teacher. That saying still goes on. If you can't make it anywhere else. These are facts. I'm not here to bring in new ideas into your thinking, but this is what the students are saying. I can give you dreams and dreams of it. So while we are a global university, what is the quality with which we engage with the young person? Are we engaging with the young person with the knowledge of their mind? Are we engaging with the young person with the knowledge that they could be right, actually, and I could be wrong as the adult? Adolescents respond vigorously to what is rational and logically sound. Those of you who are teachers, those of you who worked with children for a long time, when there's a riot in the classroom, when there is a disaster happening in a university, what works? Not the cane, not the disciplining, not the rules, but sitting down over a table and fighting it out with logic and reason. That's what brings us through time and time and time again. But instead, what is more common is that we say, this is the law, you fit in, my friend, or out. Or we label you, we call you delinquent, all those words that come along with it. Identity, which is another word that goes very, very closely along with adolescence. Identity, again, is not an adolescent phenomenon alone. All of us sitting here are grappling with our identities every moment, but it is something associated with identity. Who am I? What do I stand for? What kind of work do I want to do? Where do I want to go in life? What is my gender? This is now a question that's become, we can ask this question, what is my gender? Yes. Now this is, I've just returned from Sweden, and in Sweden, you're allowed to choose your gender. Yeah. Very, very difficult for me to, conceive of these things, but then it's possible. All these are related to identity. Now when we say identity, the phrase that comes, the image that comes into my mind, into our minds, is the I, me, my identity. But there is no such thing. Identity is the result of the interaction with the significant other in your life. If I were to be living on an uninhabited island, there is no one else there, identity is not an issue. Identity becomes an issue when there is someone else of the other gender in front of me, someone else of another culture in front of me, someone else of another orientation in front of me. So it's again that tension, me and the other. It's in that context that identity develops. So parent, how often and how willing is the system willing to engage with the parent of that who is our index? In a collectivist, largely collectivist culture like ours, who is our index? The person, the individual, or the system around that person? You can do everything you want with a high school student or a college student, but until the family integrates with the notions of that institution, you're not going to make much of a difference. Parents are very important. The educational system itself creates a certain kind of, you can spot a Stephenite 3 miles away, the way they speak, the way they dress. You can spot somebody from between Oxford and Cambridge. You can make the difference out in their accent, in the way they hold themselves, in the language that they use. So the system of education creates a certain kind of a person. Yeah. This identity crisis, we hope, leads us to identity achievement. There's a crisis, the tension between the individual and the system. We want identity achievement, a person who has gone through the identity crisis, emerged with a clear sense of direction, and so on and so on. Yeah? This is what we want. At the end of adolescence, we want someone who has a high sense of self-esteem, healthy acceptance of personal assets and liabilities. All this is what we want. But more often than not, this is what happens. Foreclosure. We don't let the butterfly actually come out of go through the struggle of going through the pupa and the chrysalis and coming out as a glorious individual. Yeah. What usually happens is fit in. The foreclosed person blindly accepts and endorses others' views. It's very, very difficult. It takes a long time for us to get children in high school to say, actually, IIT is just one other institution. There is also institutions for the humanities. There are also institutions for business and commerce. Very hard to get them to shift. They're foreclosing very, very quickly, very easily. These are the ones actually with poor self-esteem. The ones who foreclose, the ones who have not allowed themselves to be tested, whatever the test is. Rigid in their thinking, low in their, why is it that our country does not produce anything original? Yeah, you've said just now that we're not amongst the top universities. What is it that India, Narayana Murthy asked this, isn't it? What is it that India has contributed that is a household appliance for the whole world? Very hard to find these things. Originality, where does it come from? Originality comes from when the person is allowed to fight with the system. Yeah? So more often than not, it's foreclosure that we are. Here is what I refer to as career beliefs. Yeah? I have to take up science. This is a class 12 student, I think. That's what you study if you're intelligent. You see the link. Science and intelligence have been yoked together, which means Dev is a dud. So is Manmohan Singh and so is Chidambaram. They never studied science. Yeah? Then I must try to become a doctor or an engineer. Why? You see, the purpose of education is completely different in many, many houses. To bring honor to my family, not to get myself educated. Yeah? I'll go on to this last slide and leave it there. Aspiration and engagement. This is a model that I use. When I say aspiration, I'm referring to the individual dreams and wishes that you have. And engagement, when I refer to engagement, I mean the system. At the end of the day, none of us live on an uninhabited island. We live in the rough and tumble of a society, of a system. What do we mean by aspiration over here? Keeping adolescence in our frame of reference. To be eagerly desirous for something of high value, yeah, to rise higher, direct one's attentions at achieving something. Yeah. A definition of aspiration is something that I want to be, something that I want to become. Now, in order to become this, the system, the university system, the educational system, or whatever it is, has given the individual avenues through which these aspirations could be achieved. Through which these aspirations could be achieved. Yeah. Now, we need to fit in. We need to fit in order to achieve our aspirations. But the fitting in often is like this. I'll just take a minute to look at it. If we say aspiration is on the vertical axis and engagement is the horizontal axis, you can have 4 kinds of engagements. You can have box 1, type 1, where the aspiration has died and the desire to engage with the system is also low. These are the ones who are going down, who are sad and depressed and upset. You can have a second type who's angry because the aspiration is there and the system is not giving you what you need. The happy box, aspiration is high and the engagement is there. Yeah. You could also have young people. You could also have young people who don't have high aspirations but who are happy, but who are engaged. So when we look at adolescence and we look at that mapping on to higher education, we need to be much more nuanced. There is obviously no one methodology that will work for everyone. Yeah? My time is gone. Dave is making faces at me here. So I will stop for now because I have another chance to come back at you. And during the breaks, I'm there for us to have a conversation if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. I didn't get a chance to have breakfast, but you certainly gave us a lot of food for thought. I would now like to ask Dr. Annie Koshi to share her thoughts with us.